got this frame rail just teetering on some welding magnets and a stack of wood over here. This is as accurate as it gets for a bush rig, but this frame rail is looking pretty good. I've been able to get most of the surfaces touching on either edge of the rectangle tubes from the stock versus new replacement, and I'm happy to start welding this in. I officially have these frame rails tacked in and assembled on the Samurai. I also put the steering box in here, and this Toyota IFS steering box is looking pretty good. The downside is that it sticks out very far in front of the Samurai, a little bit further than what I wanted originally. I was really hoping if I drove up to a wall, the first thing to hit would be my tires, but that's not going to be the case with this, because just with the angle of the pitman arm and having that drag link with the rear steering of the Toyota IFS box where it swings backwards, the IFS box is the furthest thing forward. This isn't too bad because I do need a spot for my winch, and it isn't going to stick out too much further than what my winch and fairlead would do. So along with this steering box, I also put in my drag link. And the reason I'm doing that is so I can make sure that my Panhard bar has essentially the same profile that the drag link does. So if you crouch down and look at the Samurai from the front, I'm really trying to get my Panhard bar to have the exact same profile and the same arc. And the reason for that is that they travel in the same radius when the suspension compresses or extends. And this is really the stage that we start buttoning up the front of this, and I'll start cutting out the proper Panhard bar mounts and get all of this tacked together and articulating properly. Last night I got enough confidence in these mock mounts for the Panhard bar that I went ahead and did some design on my computer last night in SolidWorks. I've loaded up a chunk of 1/4 inch steel and I'm ready to cut this out. We're then going to weld it all together using a jig, and then we're going to slap this underneath the Samurai and then cycle that suspension up and down once again. There we have it, YouTube. We've got these mounts complete for the Panhard bar. This is the frame side mount. It's going to click onto the square tube. And then this is the axle side mount that's going to mount right onto the housing itself. This Panhard bar is now bolted in, and I'm ready to start articulating the suspension. I find that I keep fighting with these tires. They're just really big, heavy, and awkward, and I don't have a good way of cycling the suspension to full extension and full droop at the same time. So I think I'm just gonna drop these tires, I'm gonna tear them off, and I'm just gonna cycle the housing itself because I've already checked for tire clearances and I know I'm fine with that. The only thing I need to be concerned about is really that the Panhard bar is not colliding with my steering arms, the tie rod, or the diff housing itself. And all of that can be achieved with tearing these tires off and just using the housing. With the Samurai at ride height and the wheels turned all the way to the driver's side, we're able to make sure that we have good clearance with the tie rod and the Panhard bar. On the passenger side, our steering arms and the tie rod clear the axle side mount, no problem. When we're at ride height and the wheels are turned all the way to the passenger side, we do see that our tie rod is coming very close to the Panhard bar axle side mount. So much so that we're gonna have to make sure that we put the bolt in so that the head of the bolt is on the tie rod side. Otherwise, any of the threads sticking out of the nut would collide with this tie rod. And then on the driver's side, everything is looking good when the wheels are turned to the passenger side. I know it looks like the tie rod might hit our frame side mount for the Panhard bar, but just remember that as the suspension compresses, the links are actually going to want to push the front axle forward. So we will get a little bit of self-clearancing with the tie rod around this frame side mount. I've found that one of the most convenient ways of cycling this axle housing up and down has actually been using a ratchet strap around the housing and up to my old shock mount. As I'm already doing this, I can see some issues already arising. One is that the Panhard bar is definitely coming into contact with my upper link mount. Okay, so there we go. We got the driver's side at full bump and we have the passenger side at full extension. But this is where the money's at. This is where I think we're gonna run into the most issues. So what I can see right away is that our Panhard bar is connecting directly with our upper link mount. It's looking like I need about a 1/4 inch clearance on this Panhard bar with the link mount, and then I should be good. With the steering fully turned to the passenger side, we do have enough clearance. I'm also really liking the profile of the drag link with the profile of the Panhard bar. And then for this passenger side, everything is looking good. It's clearancing everything, and I think that the mount that we have on the axle is going to work out perfectly. We have the smallest amount of contact with the Panhard bar and the top of the diff, but this is at full bump, and I think we should be able to prevent this. Sometimes things just don't work out. I made myself a to-do list because this work just keeps stacking up. And as you saw last, my upper link just broke off. Thankfully it's just a PVC one and it's just sliding out because the pipe clamps don't hold it on the weldable bungs very well. So we're just getting too much force of that axle trying to wrap out and it just keeps popping that upper link off. So I need to just get over with that. I already know that link is pretty much dialed in how I want it. So I just need to make it properly. So on my list to get there for today and get back to properly figuring out this Panhard bar is I need to re-bolt in that link, hoping it doesn't fall apart again. The reason I want to do that is because I want to check my caster. I want to make sure that everything I've set up here looks good for my caster because that upper link directly contributes to that caster angle. By twisting that upper link and lengthening it or shortening it, that's going to actually adjust my caster angle. And I need to make sure that I'm in the ballpark of what I need and I have the allowable tolerances to go back and forth to make any adjustments on the trail if I need to. The other thing is I need to look at my mounts. I need to make sure that mounting locations on the frame and on the axle housing all look good and I'm happy with them because after this it's basically going to be finalizing it and burning everything in for finish welding. So I want to do that final look at and make sure that I'm happy to move forward with it. On top of that, I need to test fit my drive shaft. I've been doing this periodically throughout the build, and I need to make sure that this final state, everything is looking good, and I need to remember that I have frame stiffeners that aren't bolted on yet. rather welded on. So I'm going to be using 3/16 frame stiffeners on the inside of the frame rails. So I need to make sure that adding an extra 3/16 onto those mounts doesn't end up colliding with the drive shaft. I am going to have the double card-in joint directly beside some of the frame side mounts. So I am a little bit worried about interferences, but that's what this is for right now. We need to make sure that we feel good about it. Once that's all done, basically means that I'm happy with my setup on the front 3-link, and I can do that final cut of the DOM tube. The reason I'm hesitant to cut that DOM tube is it's pricey and it's a little bit hard to source, and I only really have that one tube for the upper. So any mistakes means I need to reorder some metal. So I need to make sure that DOM, I'm confident in the length of it. We'll cut that out. We'll assemble it onto the weldable bungs. We'll assemble everything back into the Samurai, and then that way it won't break on me again with the PVC, and we can get back into articulating this to its extreme motions of full compression and full extension, and things won't start crumbling apart over and over. That's going to allow us to finally adjust the Panhard bar, dial in the proper locations for the frame side and axle side mounts, and then we'll do the exact same thing for the Panhard bar. We'll feel confident in the length of it. I'll cut some DOM tube, we'll assemble it properly, weld it in, and run that articulation all over again for the final check. This is very extreme. We right now have at least over full bump stop. I think this is past the full bump stop point that we determined. And on the driver's side, we have about 16 to 17 inches of extension right now, which is massive. So I don't think we're ever going to get to this point when on the trail, but I just wanted to see what the absolute limiting factors would be. And what it looks like is we're good, except for if we're turning passenger, we start to hit the tie rod on this frame rail. Where the issue comes in is the drive shaft. So the drive shaft is most definitely hitting the lower link mount when that driver side is fully extended out. I'm thinking I can probably shift that lower link mount towards the frame, so a little bit more outboard by about an inch, maybe about half an inch. And I think we should just clear that. I also think I might be able to just shave away part of the mount and hopefully get enough clearance. So I'm gonna have to think on that one and try to address that. All right, so what we're looking at now is just that full bump. So this is about 4.5, 5 inches of up travel on both sides. What we did highlight here is I need to put an arc in my Panhard bar. So running a straight Panhard bar in the mounting locations that we have right now is definitely going to contact the diff housing. And then we are millimeters away from hitting the upper link mount. So if I do ever end up lengthening that upper link, which would tilt that entire housing forward, I will definitely be hitting my Panhard bar. And our drag link and the Panhard bar have a really nice profile that look really matched. So I think I'm gonna have as minimal bump steer as I can try to afford with the compromises I have to make. Well, there we go. We just got all of the articulation and the adjustments for our Panhard bar done. This leaves us with one thing left: to pull out that PVC Panhard bar, put a bend in it, and reassemble everything and do this all over once again. We have issues with our drive shaft. It's just because that axle housing does swing out a little bit when we have that Panhard bar in there, and it just causes a small amount of touching on that mount, but that little bit of touching will be a big issue, so I definitely need to address it. I'm gonna use some Schedule 40 pipe that I have to mock up that bend, because I want to make sure that bend is done properly before I do it on my DOM, and then really tear this thing apart for the final burn-in of welding.